Trigger warning. Viewing the following content may cause intellectual strain and swelling of logical capacity. If you suffer from perpetual rectal discomfort, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the Conversations from X to Z, a show where a Generation X father and a Generation Z son talk about all sorts of different subjects ranging from politics, family, religion, current events, you name it, we'll talk about it. Anything that we find interesting, we will try to have a rational discussion. We'll try to understand each other a little bit better, and we'll try to make it entertaining for you so that you can enjoy the ride along with us. We thank you for clicking on this video, and we hope that you stick around.
Hello everyone and welcome back. Thank you for joining today's conversation. Today we are going to be talking about Gen Z. I myself am part of Gen Z. We're going to be talking about why they are unsuccessful, or why they are likely to be unsuccessful. And we're going to be talking about in what ways, and we're going to get into that. Today I'm here with my father, and we're just going to be getting into the details of it. So I'll start first, I think a big role in why Gen Z is likely to be unsuccessful and why they already are is social media, and I point at TikTok largely. I'd say we have studies, we have research that shows it affects attention span, and it affects how dopamine, like someone's average dopamine input in their brains would kind of go, and it's just affected Gen Z a lot. We have results. 60% of Gen Zers from 13 to 25 have TikTok, and let's see here, 52 according to the New York Post, 52% use it more than 1 hour per week. So that right there is an indication that it's got to be somewhat addicting, So I feel like
Do you think that's on purpose?
It being an addicting app,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, with any kind of app, you want to go for that. If you want it to be successful, I feel like it's fair to say as a business, you want whatever you put out to be as addicting and as consuming as possible to make the most profit. Now, in the sense of TikTok, I would say it's kind of gross how they do it because of the things they allow on their websites and things that are posted to, young children. For example, TikTok has, guidelines, as we've seen. There is a lot of content that is posted that is against the guidelines and that remains up on the site. An example is when the CEO of TikTok was in court and there was a video of a death threat naming someone's full name, and it had been on the site for about 32 days, I believe, and it strictly goes against their guidelines. So if stuff like that's getting out there, what else is? And on top of that, the app is extremely addicting. Young kids are using it, Gen Z has a really big, or has a lot of availability for phones, technology. So, it's not the most healthy thing.
Well, I mean, I think that's one way of approaching that issue. I'm gonna share a little article here that I found. It's from Psychology Today. It's entitled "Gen Z and the Struggle with Social Media." The key points to the article, instead of going through all of it, we're going to be linking all of these in the description if anybody wants to actually read through all of them. But the key points is compulsive social media use is rampant among teenagers and college students, and they're now aware how bad it is for their psyche. Heavy social media use has been linked with anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, poor sleep, lack of motivation, and poor social skills. And the third point is there's a growing awareness that being more invested in one's online persona than who one is as a person might be a losing proposition. Now, this is Psychology Today.
Yeah.
When you have psychiatrists getting into the space and recognizing that there are patterns of behavior that exist in particularly largely in one generation, that says a lot. You know, it says a lot to people who aren't in that generation because we don't experience things the way you do. You know, as a member of Gen Z, technology was a part of my life, but it wasn't a part of my life during my formative years. I didn't grow up addicted to technology in the same way that your generation has.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I had home consoles, but it wasn't a thing where it consumed my life.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, your generation is much more likely to spend a ridiculous amount of time gaming.
Yeah.
That's just one aspect. Then you take on top of that, you know, surfing on Snapchat and you know, Instagram, TikTok. These are just some of the platforms that are out there that allow young people to connect with each other in a way that literally was impossible for my generation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we actually had these things called home telephones, and they were mounted on the wall,
Yeah.
and you would actually have to pick it up, and it was connected by a cable, and you would dial an actual phone
I
number.
know what a telephone is, alright?
Well, you know, for the members of your generation who may be listening who don't know what an actual telephone is, I thought I would just describe that in a little better detail.
Well, actually, that's been a bit of a trend within the past year, I'd say, is switching from a smartphone to a flip phone. People are trying to, Gen Z is trying to kind of bring that back.
Yeah, what they're trying to pass off as a flip phone is never, ever, ever going to match the Motorola Razr, which was the first flip phone. I mean, you could literally assault somebody with that phone and it would still work. You know, you try that with a Samsung Fold, and you know your $1,500 phone is garbage because the screen just disintegrated. Yeah, no, it's not the same. It's not the same at all. But you know, getting back to the issues with Gen Z, you know, I think that social issues are definitely high up there, and you know, it's gone so far where, and I'm going to share again another document. This one is from the National Institutes of Health, and some of the supporting documents were provided by the National Library of Medicine. This was a study done where they more or less confirmed social media use is causing depression
Yeah.
among adolescents. And the abstract, which basically is a summary, they pretty definitively state there have been increases in adolescent depression and suicidal behavior over the last 2 decades that coincide with the advent of social media, and then they, in parentheses, platforms that allow communication via digital media, as if they needed to explain that. But they also clarify that's widely used among adolescents. At the conclusions that they reach, also reiterate that extensive research on the quantity and quality of social media use has shown an association between its use and depression in adolescents.
Yeah.
You know, that negative factor, coupled with the fact that, you know, and again, I have a another document here that shows educational attainment over the last few years. I believe this is from 1960 to 2021. You can see a fairly steady climb in educational attainment, right?
Yeah.
And what they refer to as educational attainment is high school graduation rates,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what does that mean? What does high school graduation mean in terms of what children are graduating school in terms of actual knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and abilities,
Yeah.
right? So that to me, I think, is a bigger concern. You know, what do you think? Looking around at the peers that you've known, the people that you've seen, the ones that came before you,
Yeah.
you know, and the ones that you're currently going to school with, what do you think about, you know, their educational attainment? What do you think are the factors that are influencing them? Are they actually making higher, you know, attainments than previous generations? You know, try to elaborate a little bit on that.
Okay, so I would say that education is very. I feel like anybody would agree. Education is very different from what it used to be nowadays. Nowadays, I feel like the goal for your average student is to get through the day, you know. And I feel like that is expected from somebody. I'd say anywhere from 6th grade and under. I feel like high school is especially. High school is where you really gotta start, like, okay, enough messing around. I gotta focus on what I want to do or whatever. But it's just really get through the day, get by it, not necessarily excel. Do your best. That's the attitude that, from what I've seen, most people have towards it. Now that being said, obviously not everybody is like that. There are exceptions. There are people who still strive their best, and they have dreams and things they want to accomplish and colleges they want to go to. But for the most part, it's just people who want to get the bare minimum done, who just want to, finish school and do whatever. They don't necessarily have any idea of what they're going to do afterwards. They just want to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable statement to make. I think your firsthand experience is something that cannot be discounted.
Yeah.
I think there's more to it than that. From an adult perspective, from a parent's perspective.
Well, I guess the only thing I would add on is they just don't necessarily want to be there in the first place.
I think that could be said. Obviously, when you're making generalities, that doesn't apply to everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to share a document here. This is a study done. This is done, let's see if I could come up with a date, back in September of 2020. It refers to educational experiences with Generation Z. Now, in the abstract, the one thing that stood out to me is students of Generation Z are authentic digital natives who are hypercognitive. Now, to me, that kind of says a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
it's basically a clear acknowledgement that your generation is kind of born into technology.
Yeah,
and it just kind of it's such an important part of your life that it's difficult to make direct comparisons to other generations.
Yeah, because I know people bring up, well, millennials had the internet, but the thing is, they had when millennials, had access to, the internet and that kind of stuff, they were already almost adults. They hadn't grown up with it all available to them. We had, like, Zoomers have made internet technology, their phones, all that, such an important, not like something that's just, they're not just accessible, but an important part of their daily lives. It's gotten to the point where people need to have their phone. Like, that's the mentality someone Zoomers have,
Yeah.
and I could understand that. And I'm sure you guys wanted to have a phone with you, but it's like for the wrong reasons. People want to have their phones so they can do whatever, so they can go online and stuff.
Well, I think the tendency to kind of see the negatives is part of human nature,
Yeah.
and the negatives usually scream out the loudest.
Yeah.
But I think there's also some positive aspects to your generation that need to be acknowledged. And that study that I was referring to in the conclusions, they really pointed out something significant that I think is a plus for your generation.
What would that be?
It says, in this review, the relationships and preferences of Gen Z students with technology is presented.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, some technologies with a significant impact on Gen Z education were identified: virtual and augmented reality, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, holograms, portable devices, virtual laboratories, and blockchain. In some cases, applications including combinations of various technologies. From an extensive literature review and our own experience, we identified innovative projects and or leading projects highlighting the advantages, disadvantages, and the type of skills and abilities that can be developed in different domains. That really, they kind of really delved into what does all of this really mean for your generation? You know,
Yeah.
all of this access to technology can really, render um, positive
Mm-hmm.
benefits, but it could easily render a whole lot of negative. And I think what we're seeing is pretty much indicative of every technological breakthrough that has ever occurred throughout history. You know, all technology is kind of reflective, or the use of technology is kind of reflective of society as a whole. And it kind of comes down to, you know, people who have good intentions
Mm-hmm.
and good ideas will use technology to the best of their abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People who are at the lower end of the intelligence spectrum, and people who don't make wise decisions, will use technology to facilitate their poor decisions, and engaging in their frivolous and pointless actions. So, I think that you could kind of see that in your generation.
Yeah, and I mean, that being said, my generation only spans from, I believe, what is it? My generation, you're either about 13 to 26 right now, or 11 to 26.
I believe it is 11 to 26.
So, since they have access to the technology, and s- you know, s- not even statistically, but just scientifically, it's basic biology that teenagers are not the smartest people. We make rash decisions, especially Gen Z. Gen Z is known for being very in the moment and for making rash decisions. So it would make sense that how they use technology might not be the best way when it comes to the younger side, but I mean, absolutely. There's pros and cons to everything, especially when it comes to technology. And yeah, we've made some interesting advancements in technology as it is, and that's great. But in this case, does the bad outweigh the good? Like with AI, a lot of people are concerned about the problems AI can bring.
Well, I mean, all the movies have basically told us that
Well,
AI is going to kill us. So,
yeah,
if you go by popular opinion, AI is definitely going to be the end of humanity. I think there have been certain instances where the responses of AI to certain situations have been deeply disturbing.
yeah,
But again, just like any other technology, um, you know, the assumptions and the information that is fed into it
yeah,
is fed into it by people.
yeah,
And people have perspectives, they have ideologies, and the information they provide is usually what aligns with their perspective and ideologies, and you end up having AIs that tend to reflect what those people believe.
yeah. But that's like the big question is it good or is it bad? Because you have kids. Like I've seen it myself. The Snapchat AI that they recently released. Going with school, people are using this to their advantage to just not do their work.
Well, again, are people taking advantage of technology to improve themselves, or are they reflecting their personalities by using technologies to take a shortcut and cheat?
But yeah, it obviously it would reflect the person they are.
Right? Because you can use AI to become uh, kind of like a training to help you become a better writer,
Yeah, yeah,
or to help you understand complicated concepts. Um, it's kind of a douchebaggery kind of way to be if you just use AI to copy and paste.
yeah. And in the long run, you don't learn anything, and you're just likely to be unsuccessful as it is. You're not really learning anything from it.
Now that really comes back to education, right?
Yeah,
So Gen Z and their results in education. I think it's kind of a mixed bag across the board because
yeah,
technology has definitely enabled some of Gen Z to really just knock it out of the box. But there's also a percentage of Gen Z that has really, really suffered. And I think and I'm going to go on to explain this a little bit. I think part of it has to do with, um, two pretty important aspects. One is family,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is policy,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to share a paper here. It's from the National Association of School Psychologists, right? And it's specifically about grade retention, or more commonly known as being left back,
Yeah.
and social promotion. And they kind of go through a kind of long-winded, talk about um, grade retention, and it's almost entirely about grade retention. And the one thing that I find uh, immensely amusing about this is they make assertions, and again, this will be linked, so if anybody wants to read this, they can find it. They make a lot of assertions about race, about being poor, a whole lot of things, right? And that being left back is somehow um, tied to like some sort of systemic structure, right?
Yeah.
But in the summary, and again, I'm not going to read all of it, right? But the very first part of the first sentence tells you everything you need to know. Whereas the effects of social promotion have been sorely under investigated. In other words, the researchers are boldly admitting we have done absolutely nothing to verify whether social promotion is actually doing these children any good.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at it from that point, it kind of it makes it pretty clear that there are other things affecting Gen Z other than just being part of Gen Z.
Yeah.
I'm looking in particular right now. There's an article here. It's on a Daily Caller, right? It's not one student was proficient in math in 23 Baltimore schools. Okay, and they go on and they literally, through an analysis of 150 Baltimore City schools, 23 of them, including 10 high schools, 8 elementary schools, 3 high schools, 2 middle schools, no students met math grade level expectations, according to a report by Project Baltimore. That's approximately 2,000 students that took the test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go on to also say an additional 20 schools in the district had no more than 2 students that were proficient in math, right? Like, now when you hear something like that, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How can you have entire schools where nobody is actually at grade level in math? Now, one side is going to say, "Oh, well, they're not spending enough.
Yeah.
That they're not providing enough resources, right?" And when I hear something like that, it just makes me immediately question it, right? Because I'm also providing another link here where you could see that in 2022, Baltimore spent $21,000 per student, right?
Mm-hmm.
And according to the U.S. Census, in the state of Maryland, right, in the U.S. Census in 2020, in the state of Maryland, the spending per student was $14,762 per pupil. So they are literally spending a third more per student, yet still their students are getting these ridiculous, just embarrassing results.
Yeah. I feel like the big problem and the question is, is it the students, is it the parents, is it the school? And in my opinion, I feel like it's all three. I feel like it's a bit of both. The students' behavior, their attitude towards getting an education. I feel like that is on them, because you can get a student who comes from a family in poverty and still that student can, perform extremely well academically. The thing is, it makes it harder for that student to obviously have any motivation to do that, but it's such a large, it's not like a small minority, it's such a large thing you see with Gen Z that it's definitely there. It's not just a small amount of people. I feel like with the parents, it's a lack of proper parenting, for lack of a better word. It's, you know, they haven't necessarily raised their kids well. I really don't know how else to put it, because it's not good. We've never seen stuff like this before. And then when it comes to the school's end, I feel like the school, they're focused on, just getting the kids by. They don't want the best for the kids. And then on top of that, you just got the kids who don't really care to be there.
Well, they definitely. I think it's pretty clear that you can account for parental involvement being a big chunk of it, but students' attitudes,
Yeah.
where do they come from?
From the parents.
They're largely coming from the parents, because if the parents don't care, the kids aren't going to care.
Yeah.
But it also touches upon, especially in inner city large schools, the demoralization of teachers. Now there's multiple factors to that. Part of it is dealing with crappy behavior from kids. The other part of it is to a certain degree tied to the union. When you as a teacher, when you genuinely care about students, and you come in every day and you try your best for each and every one of those kids, and year after year, you end up getting the same exact pay raise as the teacher who comes in and does the bare minimum that's required by the contract. Eventually you get to the point where you're gonna be like, what's the point? Why am I continuing to do this when I just have to deal with these kids with these really, really bad attitudes? I have to deal with unsupported families, and then on top of that, the school is not allowed to recognize my effort because of the union contract. So why should I keep doing this? And I completely understand that. But I think as far as Gen Z goes, there's other issues that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
I think primary concerns of economic issues.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that leads into their ability to succeed. Like they're facing challenges that other generations didn't. And I think one of the best ways to kind of sum it up here, and I'm sharing an article real quick, Consumer Affairs, which is a fairly respectable website. I think a lot of people would agree that they're not necessarily the most radical in any direction. They released an article on June 1st, 2023.
Yeah.
And again, the takeaways from this article: Gen Z dollars today have 86% less purchasing power than those from when baby boomers were in their 20s. The cost of public and private school tuition has increased by 310% and 245% respectively since the 1970s, and Gen Zers and millennials are paying 57% more per gallon of gas than baby boomers.
Yeah.
Right, so that's just kind of like a general overview of some of the economic concerns. I think it's pretty pretty clear to say that there's some real challenges, and how can those challenges not affect the way that you look at the world? How could it not affect the way that you think about things that are going on? So from your perspective, it's not like you've really had a chance to get out there and like have a real full-time job yet because you're still young.
Yeah.
But people, you see other people's struggles and the lives that other people live.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I feel like the biggest issue and also fear for Gen Z when it comes to that kind of stuff, when it comes to finances and economics, is inflation. Gas prices for some time. I wouldn't really say now. I would say gas prices are definitely high, but it's not as bad as it was, like 2 years ago. I feel like that right now is not much of a problem, but it's a houses, house costs. Gen Z is just scared to kind of buy and pay a mortgage, because how expensive all that is. and they just don't want to, simply put, because it's so much money. They kind of have to deal with it. Not many people have had to kind of put up with that, and that is probably the biggest thing for them as far as it goes, being independent. And the amount of money they get from their jobs to pay for a mortgage and to pay for their way of life, it's not like they can't, but it's definitely not practical for them. And that's something that Gen Z kind of doesn't get. Is like, sometimes not everything is going to work out the way you want it, but they're known for wanting that. They're known for wanting everything to be their way and work out how they want.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. And there's some supporting data to add to that.
Yeah.
That Consumer Affairs article that I mentioned, they have some data to back that up to a certain degree. Income is definitely a concern.
Yeah.
They show here from 1970 to 2020, right? The average income that American has enjoyed has grown by about 80%, right? But that's not been enough to keep up with the increase in the consumer price index,
Yeah.
which they show has grown exponentially, right? And then you made the point about homes, right? So they also shared data about homes. In 1970, right now they have two sides to this, right? They have the money that it actually cost,
Yeah.
and then the money that it would cost if it was using today's money,
Yeah.
right? So that's called adjusted for 2022 inflation,
Yeah.
right? So in 1970, median home price, all right? Now to be specific, right? Because not everybody is fully aware. Not everybody understands these terms, right? So, what do you think median home price means? What do you think that specifically refers to?
The average home price.
Okay, that would be mean home price,
Oh.
right? Median literally means middle,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, like
You take the number in the
take
middle.
the house that's free, right, and then
Then you
take
take
the
the
house
highest
that's
one.
like $80 million.
Yeah, you meet in the middle.
And right in whatever's in the middle of that distribution,
Yeah.
that's what they refer to as the median home price.
Yeah.
All right, so going back to the graph, in 1970, the median home price was $24,800, right? And they're adjusting it for inflation to be $185,600, right? If it was $2022. Now, come to 2022, and they're saying that the median home price is $370,600. Again,
That's
these
ridiculous.
numbers aren't necessarily all that useful
Yeah.
because, like I said, they're taking the home that you can get for free from a seizure or whatever,
Yeah.
and then they're taking the home that costs like $80 million,
Yeah. It's kind
and
of
then just
exaggerated.
chopping it in half. Most homes don't fit that, right?
Yeah.
And then you take places like Los Angeles, you take places like Silicon Valley, you take places like New York, where their property values are so overbloated
Yeah.
unjustly because they're really not worth what they're worth.
Yeah.
And then you take places like some patch of land like out in the desert in Arizona. Yeah, the median home price just really doesn't mean anything. What they really should do is look for the average home price.
Yeah.
And to do a good average, you drop the bottom and top 10%.
Yeah.
Because those are outliers, right? Your bottom 10% is not going to be consistent, and neither is your top, right? So you take those two portions out, and whatever that 80th percentile is in the middle, you average that, and that's a much more accurate representation of what you could reasonably expect.
Yeah.
So I would suspect that the average home price is substantially less than $370,000
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Absolutely.
most Americans, but it is what it is, and let's say millennials or Gen Zers are predominantly in big cities.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that is what they're looking at, and that scares them, or that demoralizes them and makes them think that they can't use that. So you combine that with the lower wages I think you can make a reasonable case to say that, maybe they do have some valid concerns.
Yeah.
But I also think that, there's an attitude there that, just kind of, it's kind of like a combination of nihilism and somewhere between nihilism and laziness.
Yeah.
Like Gen Zs and millennials started the quiet quitting thing.
Yeah.
And, my generation always understood that if you want something, you got to go get it.
Yeah.
You got to work to make it happen. So, a difference in generation, sure.
Yeah, speaking of a difference in generation, I have a graph here from the Washington Post. This was posted in 2021.
Okay.
And it says, Gen Z, for Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X, and their views on different aspects onto what quarantine has kind of made things more difficult to do. And in the graph, in the differences, you could see, the differences between generation and how they look at things. For example, pursuing a career, 46% of Gen Z thinks that it is more difficult to pursue a career due to the pandemic. And then 36% of millennials agree that it's harder, and 31% of Gen X think that it's more difficult. So you can see there, Gen Z thinks it's more difficult to kind of do stuff like that, while people from your generation don't see it as anywhere near as much of a problem as Gen Z does, or millennials. So I would say that, yeah, they definitely got a different look on things when it comes to that. And yeah, it's a little bit of laziness, I would agree. But with like finding a home and wages and stuff, here I have an article from the New York Times that states nearly a third of Gen Z is living at home and says they plan to stay. And they state that the average salary for a Zoomer is 50,000. And what they claim is that 32% that aren't living with a parent and aren't paying rent, that are living on their own, they're using half of that to pay for wherever they're staying, whether it's rental or a mortgage. And I feel like that's a little much, but still, if you're making 50,000, you got to use
No,
half to live.
it's beyond a little much. And this kind of goes back to education, right? Because if your generation was taught budgeting,
Yeah.
right, household budgeting,
Which I'm 15, and they never showed us how to do that kind of stuff. They never showed us how to write a check.
in any kind of common sense world, you are taught that no more than 25% of your take home pay
Yeah.
should be spent on housing,
Yeah.
right? That's standard budgeting. The way you divide your income so that you make an actual budget that's survivable,
Yeah.
where you're not struggling, where you're not dying,
Yeah.
is 25% of your take home pay is allotted to your housing expense.
Yeah.
If you exceed that,
Yeah.
then you start making things tight, and then you create a situation where you're living paycheck to paycheck, but you're doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to. The issue is that people want, right? And when people want, they're willing to extend themselves
Yeah.
beyond common sense in order to get. Delayed gratification, I think, is a huge thing that your generation just really sucks at.
Yeah.
Because, again, due to parenting and other issues, you guys are just kind of spoiled to a large degree. Where
Yeah, from what I've seen, they claim we're very ambitious. That's the term they like to use.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being ambitious if you have an actual plan on how to achieve it,
Yeah.
and you don't just expect it to fall into your lap
Yeah.
because you've been coddled your whole life and everybody has told you how amazing and wonderful you are. That kind of mentality is guaranteed to kind of set you up for failure.
Yeah. People gotta understand. I feel like that's something Gen Z struggles with, is that you have to work for some stuff, and especially when it comes to education, you have to work for that. People, affirmative action, this whole thing going on with that, people gotta realize like this is a good thing. Now, obviously, it's still gonna kind of go on, but people are just getting handouts. They're expecting to get handouts when they can't. You have to understand, especially when it comes to the real world, when it comes to a job, when it comes to college, You have to work at it, and you have to take time. You know, you're not going to get it all right away.
I mean, everybody wants stuff for free. That's
Well, I mean,
that's kind of hard to argue with.
if you still want to talk about stuff for free right here, I have from the New York Post, and this is coming. They're taking these statistics from Harvard, and you have admission rates for applicants by race. And you got 15.3% white, 12.7% Asian American, 56.1% African American, 31.3% Hispanic, and then there's 14.6 for all applicants.
Well, don't you understand? We have to make up for all of these years of systemic discrimination. That's why we have to be racist against white people and Asians now, so that we can correct for all of these years of discrimination for the coloreds. Even though Asians were once coloreds, but we don't call them coloreds now because they're successful. So clearly, it's okay to discriminate against white and Asian people because we need to make sure that all the other people can get in. Don't you understand that? No, you don't get that.
Yeah,
That
but
logic doesn't make sense to you?
It's plain racism.
Of course it's racism, but that's not the point. They don't see it that way. They think it's perfectly fine to discriminate. I mean, how else do you end up with equity? It's not equality of opportunity. They want equality of outcome. And the only way you're ever going to get that is to oppress the people that succeed in order to allow the people who don't succeed to be able to reach some level of comparison to the people who you've squashed.
Yeah.
So anyway, but outside of, those types of situations, I think there's a general impression that your generation is really struggling and is not very likely to succeed. Other than the subjects that we've discussed, do you think there's anything else that might contribute to that impression that people have, that your generation kind of lacks the basic tools for survival?
Not really, because it seems like, the focuses of Gen Z are very wrong, I guess. They focus on the wrong things. The thing that they all claim that Gen Z focuses on is climate change, diversity. That's the two main things, sustainability. That's what they claim that we focus on the most. And it's not really what needs to be focused on the most, And I feel like saying that we're, I guess, behind isn't an unfair thing to do, if those are real big things that, like, we prioritize.
Well, I would add on to that every generation from the beginning of time has had a ratio, right? The ratio between smart people and dumb people. And it seems, to the casual observer, that the percentage of dumb people seems to get bigger with every succeeding generation, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what that means for your generation is that, again, to the casual observer, it appears that your generation has the highest percentage of stupid people that our world has ever known. And for those of you who may not believe me, let me just share an article that I came across on Newsweek. The name of this article is "Teen Needs Surgery After Getting USB Cable Stuck in His Penis." Now, let me make sure that everybody understands exactly what this means. This kid, first of all, this article was released September 17th in 2021, right? This kid's 15 years old. To sum it up, he wanted to measure his penis, and he thought the best way to do that was to insert a USB cable inside his urethra. As you can see on the screen, here is the X-ray showing how he just kept feeding the USB cable into his penis to the point that it basically knotted up inside there so that he couldn't pull it out, which then required him going to the hospital to get surgery. My generation had stupid people, but I never, ever heard of anybody in my generation saying, I want to measure my willy. Oh man, what can I use? I know. I'll use a USB cable. Man, that's just that's next level stupid.
That kid, man, I don't know what he was thinking. I really don't. I really don't. I feel like there's a level of stupid there that it can't necessarily be explained, because I don't want to try to, act as in defense of it. But I feel like if you do something like that, the moment you start sticking it in your urethra and you feel that pain, that's a pretty good indication to stop.
I again, that just adds more credibility to the lack of intelligence.
Like, not like you should stick anything in your urethra in general, but I feel like, once you do that and you feel that amount of pain, I don't know why you would try more.
And then they even have a picture. I'm not going to show it, but they have a picture in the article. It's blurred out to some degree, but they have a picture of the article of the actual USB cable, and it's all bloody.
Freaking idiots, man.
Oh God!
Was it like a real?
Yeah, no, it's an actual USB cable. It's just funny. I can't even describe it. It's hilarious. But with that being said, I think we've covered a lot of points. I think it's pretty clear that Gen Z is like, to some degree every other generation. There
Dude.
are highlights. There are good points.
Yeah.
There are bad points. I think, unfortunately for Gen Z, because of the advancement of technology and communication,
Yeah.
their stupidity tends to be on public display to a much greater degree than any other generation that came before it. Thank God my generation didn't have the kind of personal communication available like your generation did when I was growing up, because God knows how that would have went. So, I'm kind of fortunate in that sense, but I think it's pretty clear that, there's a lot of pluses and minuses. And ultimately what makes the difference is how you as an individual person approaches what's available to you.
Yeah.
You know?
I believe the best people in Gen Z and anybody in general can do is just don't necessarily try to follow people you just see just because everybody's into it. Try to learn about what's going on, try to educate yourself, be knowledgeable about what you're doing and what you're getting yourself into, and just go at whatever you're doing, just go at it as hard as you can. Do the best you can in that, but make sure you're aware of what you're doing, because I feel like a lot of them kind of just are buying into it without any idea of what it really is.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that's pretty much going to wrap up this particular conversation.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we had it. I think you've shared some things with me from your perspective that I wasn't previously aware of. I hope that during this conversation I've given you some information that you were not able to have access to before,
Mm-hmm.
and that allows you to have a broader base from which to form your own ideas,
Yeah.
so that you could approach decisions in the future with the best possible set of inputs, so that you can create the best possible output or outcome.
Yeah.
My goal for this show and for the conversations that we have is for us to not only have conversations about everything, whatever's going on in the world on that particular day, politics, religion, whatever the subject is. It's also for us to draw a better understanding of each other.
Yeah.
You're getting older now. You're not a little kid, so I wanna understand you more as an individual instead of just as my son. And I hope that you can understand that there's more to me than just being, a father.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these types of conversations will go a long way to help that become a reality. and I hope that it's compelling content for people to watch.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'm not the only father out there that wants to have this kind of conversation with their child.
Yeah, and I also feel like I'm not the only, not necessarily just son, but child of a parent who has a certain views that most people my age don't have. You know, I lean more to the right. I'm more conservative. A lot of people my age nowadays are not at all. They're completely against it, and you're, looked down upon if you disagree with it. So I feel like, yeah, it's good for people to know that just because it's not trendy or popular doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong and you're a horrible person for having the views and opinions that you do.
Well, to finish this up, my name is Anthony, and I'm Generation X.
And my name's Jeremiah, and I'm Generation Z.
That's a perfect example of Generation Z right there for you. And thank you for joining us for this conversation, and we hope to see you in the next one.